What is happening, people? Today we're going over Bitcoin. We're going to dive down the white paper. We're going to give it a read. I'm going to look at the diagrams, going to explain it as best as I can for beginners. So I've also done an article on my website that follows this down, and basically what the article is it's like a simplified version of the white paper for beginners. So I'm going to switch screens. Look at this. Wait, how fancy was that? So this is my website. I've got a bunch of articles up here. Go check them out. We're going to dive down this one. So I've got the white paper up here. So it says Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So we're just going to start from the very beginning, and we're going to try and make it all the way to the end. It's 13 pages long. A lot of it isn't really relevant, especially for beginners. It's more like the first 5 or 6 pages are not even that. The first 4 or 5 pages are what are important for this. So we'll start off from the very beginning. So I wasn't happy with my fundamental understanding of Bitcoin, so I made it my mission to like figure it out over the last few days, and this is basically like a summary of everything that I've learned. So we'll start with the original. The Bitcoin white paper can be found on my website here. You just click that, or you could just type in Bitcoin white paper in Google if you want to read along with me. It helps you understand it a bit. So in 2008, in October 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto published a paper describing Bitcoin and how it can be used as a digital currency. There you go, get a bigger screen for you. So he released the white paper. A bunch of like techie people found it. It went out in some sort of like newsletter with a cryptographic newsletter or something like that. So it picked up steam in January 2009. So a few months later, the Bitcoin network went live. So Satoshi actually coded it and he launched it. So the first Bitcoin block was officially mined by Satoshi in 2009, and that was called block 0, otherwise known as the Genesis block. So the first block in a blockchain is block 0, and it's sometimes called the Genesis block. Now the way blockchain works, like you'll understand this in a minute, but the first block has to be coded to allow it to work. Like it has to have some special code behind it to allow it to work, but after that the code works for it. I'm not going to dive too much into that. So nobody actually knows who this Satoshi Nakamoto person is. It could be a guy, it could be a girl, it could be a group of people, a business enterprise, it could be anybody. Nobody knows. In December 2010, Satoshi Nakamoto became inactive in the development of Bitcoin and stopped posting on the Bitcoin talk forums, where he or she also posted and like with active development and answered questions and like talking about the future roadmap and where they think it's going to go. So December 2010, that stopped. Rumors spread. Some people claim Satoshi's dead. Others claim he's just lurking in the shadow as a humble crypto Jesus, like just looking over everyone. Nobody really knows. Every now and then you'll get some random geezer popping up saying they're the real Satoshi, and like the community quickly figures out how full of shit they are. They just denounce them straight away. Until someone comes out and can move one of the Bitcoins in Satoshi's known addresses, like the question of who Satoshi Nakamoto actually is will remain unanswered, really. So when he or she launched the Bitcoin network, they pre-mined a million Bitcoins. So if anything moves out of the addresses that we know that they have, that Satoshi has, and someone can say, look, I'm the real Satoshi, watch me move this Bitcoin, then, well, it's legit because he's got the private keys. He or she knows how to access it. So that was the Satoshi. So be wary of people if they're claiming they're Satoshi Nakamoto. You'll have a few scam artists out there, especially for beginners. So let's dive down. That was like a quick introduction about Satoshi. So we'll go back to the white paper. It says Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So when it says peer-to-peer, oh, let me get this up for you. When it says peer-to-peer, like it does here, that just means like me and you speaking. It's like one party speaking to another party rather than having someone in the middle. So if you think of a bank, you've got me sending money to you, you've got the bank that receives it, and then you've got you on this side. So you've got a party on either end and you've got a middle party. Peer-to-peer means it's just us two. So I can send money to you, you can send money to me. That's how that works. So we'll go down here. I'll just read off this for you. A peer-to-peer electronic cash system is when online payments can be sent directly from one party to another without going through a middle party. So if I was giving that an example, as a real-world example, if I were to send $10 to you, it would go through the bank, then the bank would send it to you, and they'd like verify it, make sure it's legit. With the Bitcoin network and the way it's set up, if I were to send you one Bitcoin, which is a ridiculous amount of money, the transaction would just go straight to you. There's no geezer or bank or anyone in the middle looking at it. So it's just between us two. So a trusted third party in the middle is actually important because of the double spending problem. Now we're going to dive down the double spending problem. I've done it here. So what the double spending problem is with digital money. So it's better if I say this with like physical money. So with physical money, I can give you a tenner, and then I can't magically make another tenner appear out of thin air. But with digital money, like you're only sending like a digital file to someone. It's like a signature in a digital file. Like you're not actually sending anything physical. So you can actually duplicate that digital file, or you could falsify it. Like you can make like fake money as well, but it's just a lot harder. But you can literally you can duplicate the digital file. So if I send $500 to you, I could like duplicate that file and send it to someone else, and then send the £500 to someone else. So I could spend the same $500 and send it to loads of different people, and that's like the double spending problem. So the reason we have a trusted third party in the middle at the minute, so with the banks, is to keep that from happening. So the bank's going to say, well, the bank protects you from this like double spending problem. So it's going to verify that the money's legit. It's only been spent once. It's not been spent on anybody else. So that's how it works at the minute. How does the Bitcoin network actually get around this double spending problem? So if that is the problem, how does the Bitcoin network get around it? So a few buzzwords here. There's a lot of buzzwords in crypto that you got to get your head around. So using a combination of blockchain, cryptography, digital signatures, and network timestamps, Bitcoin runs on a hash-based proof-of-work system. Like, we're going to dive down every single one of them buzzwords, so don't worry. What this is basically summarizing is you've got the transactions here, you've got the timestamp server, you've got the proof-of-work, you've got the network, you've got the incentive, and like hashing is mentioned, and how the blockchain will actually work is mentioned in all of this. So I've basically summarized it as beginner friendly as I can. So we'll start off with a blockchain. What is a blockchain? So a blockchain is a continuously growing list of data split into blocks. A block can hold thousands of transactions, and with the current Bitcoin network, it can hold up to 1 megabyte worth of. It's got 1 megabyte worth of storage in it. So I could fill this up, and then as soon as a megabyte of like text or transactions or data has gone inside this block, it's going to cap out, and then I have to move on to the next block. But this is important. A block does not have to be filled for you to move on to the next block. So just keep that in mind, yeah? So when a new block is created, the previous block is locked in forever. So let's say we filled out just imagine a block. We filled out, I'll use this, I can't really use that as an example. Imagine a block that's getting filled up with text. It stops here, and then the next block is added onto it. Boom. This block goes on top of it, and then when this block is above it, you can no longer edit anything in the block before it. So that first block is locked in place forever. Like, I like to use a story analogy for this. So imagine you're writing a story and you run out of paper, or you finish a chapter. So it's either way. You run out of paper, or you finish a chapter, so you decide to go on to the next page so it looks neat. What do? You go and get a new piece of paper. So imagine that's how the blocks are working. You're filling it up, and then when it's full, or when you're done with that block, you move on to the next one. The only problem is, as soon as you start writing on this second piece of paper or this second block, you can never go back and edit page one, or you can't go back and edit the first block. So if you make a spelling mistake, you're fucked, like in that analogy. But you don't make spelling mistakes in Bitcoin, so don't worry about that. So it just keeps all the transactions locked in place. So it's permanent forever. So the idea behind a blockchain is something that's censorship resistant. Nobody can ever go back and edit it. So it's locked. So let's dive into cryptography. So cryptography is a method of storing is a method of securely storing and transmitting data between parties when a third party is involved. So if I were to send you a message without encrypt, say like, I don't know, any messaging system, if I were to send you a message, the person who runs that messaging system and other third parties that messaging system lets in and looks at messages, they can read what we've said to each other. But if this messaging system has encryption, what I send to you, only you can see that. So the third party can't see it, the person who runs it can't see it. It's protected. So if something's encrypted, only the two people involved in that message can see it or read it. So the person, if it is encrypted, a third party will just see mumble jumble. Like, it won't make any sense. It will make no sense at all. But for us two, through encryption, it'll make sense to us and we can read it. So digital signatures. So that's another important thing that happens. Digital signatures are similar to ordinary signatures that you sign for, but they're just an online version. Your computer does it. You don't have to like physically go on Microsoft Word and like sign anything. Your computer does it for you, but a digital signature is happening. So a transaction on the blockchain can't go through until both parties sign for it using the public key and the private key. Now, I'm not going to dive into the public key and the private key because I explained it in another video. It's here on the website. You can find it. You can find it on my website, and you can also find it on this channel. It's just this one here: how to keep your cryptocurrency safe. I go through it in detail and I explain it all here. Where is it? Private keys and public keys explained. Yeah, we'll just go through it. I'm already here. We'll just go through it. We'll have like a complete tutorial in one video. So an address is a randomly generated sequence of I'm not gonna. It is a bit baffling, all that. It takes yourself a minute to get your head around it. So we're not going to dive down that. It's already hard enough, all this other stuff. So if you want to learn more about the public keys and the private keys, go watch my video or go read that. There's also a link into it here. I should have just clicked that instead of going on the other bit. So a hash is a cryptographic function which takes an input, which is like a message, data, anything like that, and it returns a fixed length of numbers and letters. So let's say we've got, I don't know, we've got a coding bar here. If I type in banana and then I press enter, it'll return something different. So when you hash something, it returns something different, but it's mathematically related, so you can get back to the original message. And all hashing does is it makes something, it changes something. Sometimes it makes it shorter, like in the public key and the private key and the addresses thing, but hashing just changes it into a different string of numbers and letters. And now the numbers and letters are quite random, so like it'll be just a big long string, which is just characters of numbers and letters. So that's what hashing is. And usually it does make stuff smaller, especially if you're working with like big inputs. I hope that made sense. Like, don't worry, because there's examples down below. Wrong one. There's an example here that's really good. So you get a completely so that's another thing. If you change a single letter into the input, so if I put banana 6 in, like I've used here, let me zoom in for you. If I put banana 6 in and then hash it, it's gonna turn out a random but fixed length string. So it's not gonna be as like alpha, whatever the word is. It's not gonna be as categorized as A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3. It's gonna be like C, Z, 1, 2, you know what I mean, you're getting the idea. So if I even change one letter in it, it's going to give me a completely different hash. It's not going to give me like, say like this example, A, B, C, D. Banana 69 wouldn't be A, B, D, C just because we've changed one number or one letter. It changes it all, like it just changes everything. So you can't even change one number and like be sort of related. It's completely random. And then it's the same thing as well. So if I put something really long in there, like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, if I put the whole book, all of the stories, all the backstories, all the short stories, all the world building, all the fan fiction, if I put that into one big long string or one big long input, it would give me back a really short hash, but that hash will be related to it, so you'll be able to reverse it. So that's what a hash is. I hope that made sense. Let's go a bit further. So a network timestamp. So whenever anything's happening inside these blocks, like timestamps are being added. So, for example, if something gets hashed, I'll just read this out here because it's a good line. A network timestamp in Bitcoin's case is when you include the time on a hash of a block. So picture it this way. There's a good thing here. Here we go. So inside here you've got the block. This is just block 1. Then you've got items inside it. So imagine these as transactions, yeah? So this is a transaction, this is a transaction, this is a transaction. In real life, there's probably more than a few transactions. There's like a few transactions inside an item. There's a few transactions in this one. It's not just one transaction per item, as I understand it, but I'm not sure. So there's a few transactions in here, a few transactions in here, blah, blah, blah. That's items. The block is this. When you hash all of these combined, you get you can like just simplify that and shorten it into a hash, and that's what they do here. So all of this gets shortened into a single string of numbers and letters. So I hope that makes sense for you. A timestamp proves that the data you're looking at must have existed at the time it shows. So what's happening is, with this hash, you also include a timestamp in it. So you're going to hash all this, and whatever time you hashed it at, you'll include a timestamp. And like the timestamp isn't like 12 o'clock, they use something what's called the Unix system. So what this is the Unix timestamp it's a counter that started from 0 back in 1970 and the 1st of January. In the 1st of January 1970, a counter started from 0 and it's been going up by 1 second ever since. So for example, yesterday when I did this article at 10 o'clock, so this is the 7th of, sorry, it was the 8th of July 2018 at 10:26 p.m. The counter was 15310887779, and that goes up by 1 every second after this. So that's all it is. So when you do a hash, you're just adding this hash into it. Yeah, hope that makes sense. So each timestamp includes the previous timestamp in its hash. So this forms a chain that reinforces the one before it. So with this hash, there's also a timestamp in it. So for this hash, the timestamp's also included, but because this hash, so this hash here has the time of this block, when this block was hashed inside it, this like reinforces the whole chain. So this is we're gonna explain proof of work in a second. So basically, the more blocks you go, the harder and harder it is to unravel. So if you wanted to unravel a hash and get back to the original message, it would require a ridiculous amount of computing power to like reverse engineer it, just by the way cryptography works. Like you can dive down that a bit further, like the whole cryptography behind it, like that's not beginner friendly. So we're just gonna I'm gonna explain it that way for now. So the timestamp's included in that, and then because the timestamp is included in this, the timestamp for the next one is including this. But that's about it. I'm stumbling over my words here. I'm hoping like I've explained that okay, but like the proof of work is gonna make you understand it a lot better. So let's go into proof of work. So proof of work is a way to prevent spam and denial of service attacks, otherwise known as DOS or DDoSes. Like you'll have heard DDoSes thrown about probably, especially if you're into like gaming and that. So what is a DDoS or a DOS? It's basically an attack which clogs up the network. So if I want to spam a network with thousands and thousands of requests, I just put a load into it and it just clogs it up. It slows it down. Sometimes it crashes. Basically, the way DDoSes work is, say like you're using something like an IP address, you can make a lot of IP addresses for free and it's not too resource intensive. So you can like actually make a lot of IP addresses and spam a network. So it's quite easy to do. But with proof of work, in order to request the network or access the network or speak to the network, you need to solve a problem before you can do that. So the problem with proof of work is it's a processing, like you need a lot of processing power to solve this problem before you can speak to the network. So we'll dive even further into it. Basically, you need a bunch of computer parts, like you need a working computer and you need an insane amount of electricity. Like the more proof of work that's required, the more electricity and the more computer and like the stronger processing power you need, so the better computer you need. And that's just expensive. So attacking with like IP addresses, quite cheap. But if you want to spam the Bitcoin network with a load of, you have to do a lot of proof of work, which requires a lot of processing power, and that's a lot of money. So your wallet will take a big hit. So it's difficult to attack the Bitcoin network. So without proof of work, all you need is a malicious mind and some thinking time. It's a low bar of entry. By combining all of this into an ongoing chain of data, the double spending problem can be solved. So a combination of all these buzzwords basically lets the network run. So now we're gonna dive into the more specific stuff. So by using all of them, there's like a chapter on each one that we're gonna go through. So the longest chain of blocks serves as proof of all the previous transactions and is the most trusted because it came from the largest combined pool of processing power. So the longest chain of blocks has required the most amount of processing power. So in general, that's going to be like the honest one. Like that is the honest one. So proof of work and nodes explained. Let's see if there's a pretty diagram. So this we're gonna go and dive down the proof of work and the network and the nodes, which is these two chapters here. I'm gonna come back to this diagram, so because it's quite handy. That let's dive down the nodes first. So the processing power, so basically computers the processing power comes from nodes and they run the network. So basically computers run the network. Anybody can be a node. So you could be a node, I could be a node, my grandma could be a node, businesses can be a node, anything you want. As long as you have a computer and you've got enough space and it's like a decent enough computer and you've got like electricity, you can be a node. Nodes are commonly referred to as miners as well. So you'll hear like the Bitcoin mining miners, like nodes are miners. Nodes is the official term for them. Most people call them miners. I'm going to bounce between the two. Like miners is pretty cool. So in order to run a node, since anybody can do it, all you need to do is you need to download the blockchain, the current one. That comes out to, as of yesterday, 174 gigabytes. So for the whole blockchain, all the transactions that have been and gone, all of it is 174 gig. And this increases every new block. So every time you add a new block to the network, that goes up a bit. So it's going to keep going up, but due to like Moore's law and the way technology advances, like we outpace it, our technology advancement outpaces the rate of growth. So this isn't like going to outgrow us and only like a few people can handle it. Do you know what I mean? So when a new transaction is made, it is broadcast to all the nodes on the network. So I make a transaction with you, and then that gets broadcast to every single computer that's running on the network, the Bitcoin network. Each node or each computer collects new transactions and starts to fill its own block. So say like a block has just been finished, we're starting a brand new block. I've just done a transaction to you. Our transaction will get logged in that block, and that's what's happening. So each node fills its own block. So out of all of the nodes in the network, they're filling their own block at the same time as everyone else. So everyone's filling up their own block. It's not one block getting filled. It's like everyone's filling their own block. Now this will make sense in a minute, so bear with me. So as new transactions are coming in, each node or each computer is simultaneously finding a difficult proof of work for its block. It's gonna start making sense in a minute, just bear with me. So the proof of work in this case, what the proof of work is for the Bitcoin network is it needs you to generate a hash. So like I said before, it's just like you take a string of text and you change it into like a sequence of numbers and letters. That's what's happening. You need to keep generating these hashes until you get a certain amount of zeros at the beginning of the hash. So bringing this back to this bit here, you also have to use the previous hash from the block before it. So this is where it starts getting like a bit baffling. So you've got a bunch of blocks in a row. When it's hashed, it moves into the next block, and in order to make a hash of everything else, so all the transactions, everything inside the block, you need to include the hash from the previous block, and you also need to include the nonce, which I'll explain in a minute. So let me ease you into it a bit more. I'll start off with this para. So the proof of work in this case requires the node to generate a hash with a certain amount of zeros at the beginning using a hash from the previous block and a nonce. A nonce is a number you add on the end to make a hash different. So in this example, previous hash, which is just it's simplified, but this previous hash here will be numbers and letters, a big long string of numbers and letters. I've just used that as an example to make it easier. The nonce is a number you add on to the end of the hash. So number 1 here, this is a nonce, and that can keep going up. So basically that's a nonce as well. It's just a number that you add on to a hash to make the next hash different. So if I want to hash this, remember how I said if you change a single letter or number, it changes the outcome of the hash. If I change that to 2, it changes that. If I change that, and so on and so on and so on, you're basically looking for the hash that comes out with a certain amount of zeros. And when you find the right hash with a certain amount of zeros, that means you've solved the proof of work. So when you solve the proof of work, that means you've won that block. So the node that was solving that has won the block. They get to claim the reward, and I'll go into all that in a minute. So let me just carry on with this. The number on the end of previous hash is the nonce, we know that. The number of 0, so this is the difficulty as well. In order to get this randomized amount of zeros at the beginning, it requires a ridiculous amount of attempts. So you have to keep processing all these different calculations until you get a hash that has got zeros at the beginning. So it's more likely to get one with 3 zeros at the beginning, but it's less likely to get one with 6 zeros at the beginning, and it's even less likely to get one with 20 zeros at the beginning. So the difficulty of the proof of work can be changed by changing the amount of zeros that have to be at the start of the hash. So basically, to keep up with technological advancements and just better computers, and better algorithms, better solving algorithms and all that good stuff, we can keep up, and we can just make it harder and harder. Alternatively, if it gets too hard, which it just won't, we can dial it back and we can use less. We can require less zeros. So that's how difficulty works. So the harder the difficulty, the more processing power is required to solve the proof of work. I hope that makes sense. So the way Bitcoin works is they try and keep it to a 10-minute average block solving time. So in order for this proof of work to finally, for someone to finally find it, even out of all of these nodes, for the average time that someone solves it is aimed to keep around 10 minutes. So if people are solving it, if the proof of work is too quick, you can make it more difficult. If people are solving it and it's taking ages to solve a block, you can dial the difficulty down. So that's how it works. And there is a significant reason, there is an important reason why it's 10 minutes as well. So that's basically the amount of confirmations, and it lets the network run without stuff getting jumbled up and people falling behind. So any faster, if it was any faster than that, you'd run into problems. Any slower, and it would just take ages, sort of thing. So 10 minutes is the sweet spot that they aim for. So here's a good line for it. Block generation is a low probability trial and error lottery rather than a complex math problem. So it's not solving really hard complicated maths. All it's doing is testing one, nope, testing one, nope, testing one, no. It's trial and error, and it's basically a lottery. So that's important to know. When a node finds the right proof of work hash, so when it finally finds it, it broadcasts its block to all the other nodes. And also, if say my computer has found it, it's going to broadcast the right proof of work hash. So it's going to send the hash to every single person on the blockchain network, all the nodes, and the nodes are going to look through it, and they're going to decide if it's valid. Make sure they're going to decide that. They're going to look at the transactions inside it, make sure nothing dodgy is going on, make sure it matches up with their own, and then if it does match up with their own, they'll verify it, they'll accept it, and then they'll move on to the next block. So other nodes accept the block if all the transactions inside it are valid and they're not already spent. Remember we said about the double spending problem. So nodes then begin working on creating the new block in the chain using the hash of the accepted block as the previous hash. So going to that example, our computer, or my computer, just solved the proof of work. I've got the hash that they want. I send it to everybody. So now for the next block, you're going to use my hash, and then they're going to put a nonce on the end, and then a nonce on the end, and then a nonce on the end. So is that starting? I hope that's starting to like make sense to you. So nodes then begin working on creating the next block in the chain using the hash of the accepted block as the previous hash. So they accept your hash and they keep using it. As long as the majority, so 51% or more of processing power, is controlled by nodes or computers or people that are not trying to cooperate and attack the network, they'll outwork the attackers and generate the longest chain. So I'm going to dive down into that in a further down below, so don't worry about that. So you just need to know that they've got our previous hash, and then that's how they're going to start with the next block. There was one more thing I wanted to mention in this, but I can't remember it. I've lost it. Nodes begin working on creating the next blocks and shit. Don't matter. We'll move on to the next bit. So that's all well and good. Like, that's how it works. But how do you ensure that nodes don't just team up and attack the network? Like, what's stopping them from like just being cheeky and breaking it? So there is an incentive behind running a node. So it's not like for your own, like it's not for your own, like for the sake of it. Like, you're not just doing it because you're a sorted guy or a sorted girl. Like, you do actually get incentive from it. So what happens is the first transaction on a new block rewards the creator of the block with a new Bitcoin, and like it rewards them with a certain amount of Bitcoin, and the reward starts getting lower and lower like the more blocks are produced, basically. So a couple of years from now, like, it's going to be really low, but by then the price of a Bitcoin is going to be really high. So it's like, you get what I mean? So the reward gets lower as more blocks are created. So how this works is when I send the proof of work to people, so when I've sent the new hash to someone, I get to include my little transaction at the very start of the next block. So because they've accepted my block, they've accepted my little first transaction. So they've accepted that. And because that's there and it's been accepted, I then get rewarded with, so that gives me a certain amount of Bitcoin. It gives me a reward, basically. So I get rewarded for solving the proof of work and running a node. So since all nodes are working on the same block until the proof of work is completed, the first node to broadcast the proof of work becomes the creator and gets rewarded. So we're all working on it at the same time, and then whoever finds the proof of work and sends the hash to everyone, they're the creator of the block, so they get to put their transaction there, which rewards them. Understand? Hopefully, like, this took me days to digest and process. So like, just keep at it. Read through it a few times. You're gonna have to. I ended up reading certain paragraphs like 50 times, man. Like, just stick in there. It is worth it when you finally get it. So this provides an incentive to run a node and support the network. It also slowly introduces more coins into circulation and distributes them fairly. So rather than having like a central governing like authority that distributes the money, like, they could be like sly as fucking just donate, like give it to the mates so the mates are rich. Do you know what I mean? But this allows new coins to go into circulation all over the world depending on who solves the proof of work. So it's a way to distribute them like fairly. Like, whoever puts processing power in, you can get like rewarded, sort of thing. So it's very similar to the way gold miners work. So a gold miner uses more and more resources to find undiscovered gold. It's like, it's harder and harder to dig deeper down the earth or dig further into the earth. And it requires more and more resources. So replace gold with processing power and electricity, and you've got Bitcoin miners. So even in the Bitcoin white paper, it is meant, this analogy is like used where it's like miners. So there you go. This gold miners expending resources. So that's where like the term miners came from. So if that's a bit interesting to know. So a node runner is a Bitcoin miner. That's pretty cool. So rather than just the node as well, sorry, rather than just like the reward as well, incentive can also be funded using transaction fees. So the cost to process the transactions like isn't free. So the difference, like the output and the input of like how much it costs to process it, you can charge a transaction fee to actually process that, and like a bit more so you can actually make a profit, sort of thing. So it is cheaper. Well, sometimes it's cheaper, sometimes it's more expensive. The busier the network, the more expensive the fees are, but the less busy the network, the cheaper the fees are. So sometimes it's cheaper than the banking system, other times it's not. So you do have to be careful. And like, bear in mind, this is only in its baby stages, Bitcoin. So in the future, like, we're aiming for no fees idea. Like, you've got people all over the world, like the shambles that's happening in Venezuela right now. Like, say like a 15p transaction fee is actually an incredible amount of money that can buy like a month worth of like food over there. So you need to like, when people are saying like, oh, fees are okay, like fees aren't okay. Like, if you want global adoption, fees aren't okay. So there's probably going to be fees for a while. Hopefully we figure out a way to not have fees, but who knows? Like, I can't predict the future, nobody can. There's also other coins that are coming up that use no fees, like Nano's a good one. I did a Nano video, go check that out, go read the article. Like, I dived into the depths of that. This one's a bit better, like this video setup, because I'm only walking around with my phone, but I'm not gonna go on anymore. So when all the coins are in circulation, incentive will transition to transaction-only fees. So when all of the bitcoins have been rewarded, so there's a limited supply of 21 million, and there's only a couple million Bitcoin left to actually like up for grabs. So when the last block is mined and the last Bitcoin is rewarded, the whole system's gone, like, for a node runner to keep going, it's gonna survive on transaction fees. But at that point, like, we don't even know what the ecosystem's going to be like. There might be like, it's impossible to predict. So that's just a possibility of the future. So don't rely too much on that. So what this does as well, so with the current system, like, you've got a problem with inflation with the current system. So like your US dollars, your euros, your Great British pound, if like you run out of money, or like the government runs out of money, they just print more and more money. They just keep printing money. And the problem with that is, if you print money, like, say like I'm holding $1,000 and they keep printing money, that grand just is worth less and less and less and less and less. So the inflation just starts dicking you in the arse, like, eventually. So the way this circulation, like this cap of Bitcoins means inflation doesn't exist. Like, your Bitcoin is only going to get more expensive. Like, it's going to get more valuable. Like, the inflation just doesn't exist. So the inflation problem's gone because no more coins can be added into circulation. So it's cool, man. The incentive also encourages nodes to stay honest. If an attacker is able to accumulate 51% or more of the processing power than all of the honest nodes, they would have to choose between generating new coins or stealing back the payments they've made. So basically, when we talk about a 51% attack, or a malicious attacker that can like supply that insane amount of processing power, which is just unheard of, they can't completely fuck everything up. So they can't like go into your addresses and change like your Bitcoin amount to 0. They can't do that. They can't, if you send 5 Bitcoin to your mum, they can't like stop that. But what they can do is they can start double spending. So if they send 5 Bitcoin to me and I send them some shoes, they can like, or like I send something back to them, they can charge that back. They can get their money back. So that's all they can really do. So the amount of money they can make, it's actually more profitable to generate more new coins. So since they've got 51% of the network under their, like, they've got 51% of the processing power, they will mine new coins, so new Bitcoins, faster than everybody else combined. So they're going to be outpacing people, and they're going to be accumulating more Bitcoins than everyone else. So like that's a lot more money than like stealing back their payments. Like, they're just going to make so much more money by generating new coins. And because of the way that there's only a limit of 21 million, and like they're going to be generating fast coins. Like, they outpace everyone else, so they're just going to outpace everybody. So it's sorry, I should mention as well that the reason they can't just like go and steal your money randomly out of your wallet if you've not like transacted with them is because the digital signatures provide protection for this. So basically, like I said before, is when a transaction goes through, using the public key and the private key, both parties need to sign the transaction for it to go through. So unless you've got involved with that, like, they can't steal your money. So he can't just randomly come over here and take £5 off you. You have to transact with him and then he'll just get his money back. So he's just gonna steal his money back. I hope that made sense. That was a bit messy, that explanation, but you get the gist of it, I hope. So where were we up to? This relates back to the double spending problem. The attacker can double spend their money, but they can't change your balance to 0 directly or steal the money you sent to your mum. So I've just literally said that. If the 51% attacker were to play by the rules, they'd earn more coins than everyone else combined. Breaking the system would destroy their own potential wealth in the process as well. So if they wanted to break the system as well, like, they'd like be destroying their own wealth. So it's just like, what's the point in that? So basically, with the Bitcoin network and the way it runs, there's no monetary incentive in attacking Bitcoin because you make more money by supporting and helping Bitcoin. So the only actual incentive to attack Bitcoin is you're a bit of a sadist and you just want the world to burn, mate. So like, if you're the Joker, you just want to see everything go to shit. Like, that's the only reason like you want to attack Bitcoin, really. So or maybe like competing coins, but like, I don't know, like, there's no monetary incentive is the gist of it. So that basically sums up the most important parts of the Bitcoin network. Like, if you can explain that in your own words to people and get it across to people, you're pretty up there with people. Like, 95% of people won't know anything about this, so you're already in the top 5%, and then only 1% of them will be able to explain it with any, like, I don't know, not a lot of people can explain this, or even not a lot of people read it. Like, a lot of people claim they've read the white paper, but if we're honest, like, I was the same, like, oh yeah, I've read the white paper, but if I was honest, like, I only skim read it for like 5 minutes, like, oh, I've read it, but I've just not. But it takes a while to digest, man. So this is like the further study, the more advanced stuff. It's still relevant, but it's like what if scenarios, like little bits and bobs, and it's things like that. So let's dive down. So the chapters are reclaiming disk space, simplified payment verification, combining and splitting value, privacy, and calculations. This is all just explaining like what I just said then. The chapters mentioned in the bullet point, yeah, blah blah blah. So reclaiming disk space, like, I've managed to like turn this down to like, these are only brief summaries now, because getting too into this, like, this video's gonna be going on long enough, like, it'll be hours the video long if I dive down these paragraphs as well. So like, the reclaiming disk space is here. You can see how it works. So like, you hash these are transactions, you hash that transaction, so you get a smaller amount. So rather than having this whole transaction clogging up, you can hash them to make them smaller, to make them take up less space, and then you can hash them and hash them again and hash them again. You keep hashing them, but the problem is, like, the original problem was, if you keep hashing them, you change the hash of the blocks up here. So there's a workaround for it called the Merkle root. So I'm not going to dive down the Merkle root because it takes a while to explain and it's a bit baffling. So for reclaiming disk space, all transactions can be hashed without breaking the block's hash using a Merkle tree. And basically all this does is clears up space for your computer. So like we said before, the blockchain at the minute is like 174 gig. Without the Merkle tree, it'd be a lot bigger than that. So I hope that makes sense. Look at all the diagrams. Like, you've got the root hash. So basically, this, I'm not going to get into that. It's a ball ache to explain. So simplified payment verification. This was for me personally the hardest bit to get my head around. Like, I don't know if they just worded it poorly, or there's a special line here that just really baffles me. This line in particular, like, if you read the whole thing, it says he can't check the transaction for himself, but by linking it to a place in the chain. So by linking it, like, I don't know what linking it to a place in the chain is. I'm assuming it's like anywhere in the chain. Like, if you link anywhere in like the block where your transaction is stored. Like that's what that means, but it's not a very good explanation, I don't think, because I still don't fully understand that. So like, here's my attempt at getting my head around it. So you can verify a payment on the blockchain. So if you make a transaction and it's gone onto the blockchain, you can actually verify that without running a full node on your computer. So the way you do this is by you keep a copy of all the block headers, which are basically the block hashes of the longest proof of work chain. So all these chains, rather than storing all of these hashes and all of these transactions and all the hashes of the transactions, you only have to store like the block header, which is just a hash of the block. So you only have to store this hash, this hash. So that's how that works. It's like a shortened version, but that shortened version doesn't break anything because of like the reclaiming display and the Merkle tree. Like hashing it doesn't break the hashing like proof of work of all the others. Oh, that's what I need. While we're on this, the proof of work. So like, because each block requires the proof of work hash from the other one, the more blocks that get added onto it, the more proof of work is required to unravel all that. So as more blocks are added, it gets harder and harder to go further down the chain. So the first block requires a staggering amount of so if you've got one block below the one that's being written right now, this block here it still requires a lot of processing power to unravel, but then the block below that is exponential, and then that's exponential, and that's exponential. So it just gets, the more blocks down you go, the harder and harder it is to unravel, and it's an exponential, like it increases exponentially. So I hope that, like, I wish I mentioned that earlier, like back in the proof of work bit, just because it's like relevant to all that. I don't want to be explaining it in this section, do you know what I mean? So you can query the full network nodes until you're convinced you're working with the longest chain. So when you're happy, you can obtain the Merkle branch linking the transaction to the block it's timestamped in. You can't check the actual transaction itself, but you can see that a network node has accepted it by linking to a place in the chain. So I've had to steal that line that they've said, because it's like, it's just not 100% to me. So if you're like watching this video, like, give your version of explaining that, because this is like, it is baffling. Blocks added after it continue to confirm the network has accepted it. So basically, through the hashing, through the Merkle root, you can basically check that it's been accepted, and the more blocks that are added on it, like I just said, it just basically confirms it each time. So as a new block gets added, it confirms it even more, because it's so exponential to work backwards. I'm not going to dive too much into that, because it gets like, there are ways that you can actually like we were going on the attacking example before, there are ways to actually attack the network, and like you can make, since every block has its, every node is running its own block, you can make side chains, and then if you can make someone work on your side chain rather than the main chain, like that's when you can run into problems. But that's why there's usually confirmations. So the more confirmation, when you see confirmations, that just means blocks like confirmed. So when you see 3 confirmations, that's like 3 blocks rather than 1 block. So the more, if some attacker gets you on their side malicious chain, as more and more confirmations come in, it requires more and more processing power to keep you on this attacking chain. Like that's a simplified explanation. It is hard to explain in simple terms. This like combining and splitting value. Transactions contain multiple inputs and 2 outputs to allow value to be split and combined. So rather than a new transaction being made for every single cent, so if I had like $5, for example, rather than sending a separate transaction for every 1, 2, 3, like 500 transactions, you can like combine and split value, and you can enter that, you can input that. So it just stops you clogging up the network with a load of transactions. You can move it all as one transaction. I don't know what I'm saying there. 2 outputs as well. So you've got multiple inputs, like that works with change as well. So like £5.50, like you get the idea. And then there's 2 outputs, one for the payment and the other for returning change back to the sender, if there is any. So where's the graph for this? So you've got, there you go, transaction in. Rather than just having one, you can have multiple ones. It's a way of combining and splitting value. It saves space, basically. Stops it clogging everything up, and then you can output the transaction, and you can output the change that's supposed to go back. Happy days. Sorry, the payment. Yeah, well, it's the same thing. Privacy. With the current banking system, access to your privacy is limited to the parties involved and the bank, so it's sort of private. So if I make a transaction to you right now using the current banking system, I'll send a tenner to you, the bank receives it, and then the bank sends it onto you. So the bank and anybody that the bank lacks access, that the view of that can see it. So it's not actually private, is it? It's like it's kept private from the entire world, but it's not kept private from the banks and any third party that they let look in there. So with Bitcoin, you can keep your privacy. So every transaction with Bitcoin is public. So everything that goes through is publicly published for anybody to see. The thing is, each transaction is anonymous. So using the keys and your public key, you can make it's basically anonymous. But sorry, let me start again because that was terrible. With Bitcoin, you can keep your privacy by keeping your public key anonymous. All transactions are public, but nobody knows who made them. It behaves similar to stock exchanges. So people can see transactions, but they can't tie it to anyone. But, a big but here, this is the problem with this. So, in theory, it can be private, but the majority of people access Bitcoin through services like all the exchanges, like Coinbase, Binance, like they require full disclosure of your identity. So they want your age, they want your name, they want your telephone number, photo verification. So You've not got privacy if you're going through one of those services, because they can see what you're spending the Bitcoin on, and they can let third parties in to look at it. So it's not private because it's the same problem you run into with the banks. So in order to keep your privacy, you can't work through one of those services. But it is possible to be private. That's the important thing. And there are more like this privacy-based coins like Monero. I'm going to do a deep dive into Monero after this one, so look out for that. Stay tuned. That's baffling, but it's a load of fun at the same time. So these services can track your Bitcoin usage and even allow third parties to have a look at what you've been up to. In a system like that, you have no privacy, but privacy is possible, like I mentioned. A new key pair needs to be used for each transaction if you want to keep your privacy. So this is where paper wallets come in. So if you're using a paper wallet, if you're going like OG and like you want to stay away from everything, and you're using a paper wallet, if you use that same paper wallet for everything, or like you're going to be using the same keys with that wallet. You need a new paper wallet every single time so every transaction requires a new paper wallet. So make sure you do that if you want to keep your privacy, otherwise people can like track you. And then the calculations, like next joke, mate. I'm not Big Shaq. 2 + 2 is 1 - 3. That's quick. Whatever. Can't remember the line. Quick maths. Whatever. I'm not diving down to that. It's baffling. It's ridiculously complicated. Well, it's not. Like, you can get your head around it, sort of. Like, it starts off all right, and then it just goes fucking crazy, man. Like, look at all this here. I'm not a math guy. Well, I'm not this level of maths. You can dive down that if you want. It's a bit baffling. So there's no point in me trying to explain that when you can just when you're on that level of wanting to know that, you might as well just go to the Bitcoin white paper. Do you know what I mean? So, we made it all the way to the end, man. Last words, a summary. So this is basically like a nice little summary of everything. Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer system for electronic transactions that removes middle parties and relies on trust. The double spending problem can be solved using a combination of blockchain technology, digital signatures, timestamps, cryptography, hashes, and proof of work. A public record of transactions that cannot be censored or edited due to a specialized network of nodes. With a low bar of entry, any computer can join or leave the network at will, accepting the proof of work chain as what happened while they were gone. So when we were mentioning the nodes before, like you can leave and rejoin that network whenever you want. Like there's no like nobody stopping you from doing that. With no sense. Oh, and while all the other nodes have been running the chain, like you can, when you come back, the longest chain, like the longest proof of work chain, is the one you're going to attach onto, because that's like all the honest nodes have been working on it. It's the longest one. The longest one has the most processing power behind it, so that's most likely going to be the correct one. Like it just is the correct one. With no central authority, the Bitcoin network is a decentralized group of computers which can vote with their processing power. As long as the largest pool of processing power belongs to honest nodes, the network will run fairly and attackers won't make any progress. Nodes are kept honest through incentive rewards and transaction fees. So that's it. That's the end of it. The Bitcoin white paper can be found here. Just Google it or click through it on my article. Have a deep dive into it. I've tried summarizing it as best as I can. There are other bits that I've not touched on, but they are really niche. Like they're really specific that for a beginner you just don't need to know. So I created this article, like I said at the beginning, because I wasn't happy with my fundamental understanding of Bitcoin, and I wanted to be able to explain it to people like I've just done in this video. So I wanted to be able to comfortably explain it. I've put together this YouTube video. I hope it's helped you. The next one's going to be Ethereum/Monero. I'm doing both of them at the same time. Like they're really baffling. Slowly getting my head around them. What I also do is I stream my learning process and writing process. So while I'm writing these articles, I'm streaming on Twitch, and I'm basically like starting from the beginning and learning. So you can see like where I start, how I learn, and you can basically join in. So like I'm trying to build a community of like crypto enthusiasts that want to get involved. They want to help me learn. They want to learn with me, like just sit along and help me out, look at what I'm looking at, collaborate. Like groupthink is always better than like individual think. Like the more minds working on an explanation, the better. So we can like simplify it, make it better for everybody. Check out my socials, check out my other videos, Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff. It actually helps keep me motivated. When I see that follower count go up, yes mate, like hit me up with those followers. If you want to make podcasts, if you want to have a chat, I'll collab with you, I'll work with you. I'm all ears. Come at me. We'll hit it up. We'll get on with it. We'll get involved. And last but not least, some other articles I think you'll like. I recently did a type of cryptocurrencies article where I basically explain all the different types of coins and tokens, and I give you examples. So you've got like payment and currency coins with like Bitcoin. You've got decentralized apps. You've got Ethereum, Neo. You've got privacy coins, Monero. Like I'm just going into all the different types of coins, so you get to have a look at all them. That's a pretty cool article. That took a while to do. It's like a 40-minute video on my channel. Like it's a big topic, but it's a lot of beginners have said it's helped them out. Last but not least, how to invest in the right crypto, altcoins and ICOs explained. So basically, what you should be looking for in order to avoid scams, like how an ICO works, what you should look for on the website, what you should look for in the white paper, basically just avoiding scams. So that just goes into all that. Thanks for watching. Like, please check my socials. Love you all. Peace. I hope I've helped. Mwah! Hasta la vista. Woo! Wow, that was a sesh, mate.